Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're taking a look at the launch of Makita's new 40-volt XGT line of tools in the USA. And I want to share a few thoughts about this new line of tools and what's coming in the pipeline from Makita. Just a quick disclaimer here, this video contains speculative information, commentary, criticism compiled from publicly available fair use sources. All these details are subject to change, and the speculative information may be wrong. This is just my opinion on what's going on here. So now with that out of the way, let's get going. So Makita, awesome company and some great tools over the years. Founded in 1915 in Japan. And their first tool, so what you see here at the top, was an electric hand planer, which I thought was interesting. But where they really found the roadmap for me historically is they were produced the first, we'll call it at least mass-produced cordless drill. I think Porter Cable and a few others have some other various claims for early cordless drills, but the drill that you see, which I believe is about 7.6 volt, that you see over on the right, was one of the first mass-produced ones in the early 90s with a NiCad battery. And I remember my father got one, and he thought it was the bee's knees and was great. And I had that drill after he gave it to me, and that drill worked well for probably almost a good solid 30 years. It was an awesome tool. I mean, it wasn't as good as some of the tools out today, but man, that thing was a beast for the time and was quite the one-trick pony. So now jumping forward quite a few years, in 2007, they launched the 18-volt or the LXT line that we all know today that put Makita really on the map at the present time. That lineup is now over 275 tools. It's probably one of the largest in the industry. They've got a wide array of tools, some a little surprising, and some very unique to the Makita family. So here you go. Here's what I believe is the latest 2021, or at least late 2020 picture of the entire LXT family. And there is quite a amazing array of tools. And to be fair, there's some of these that I'm surprised how many variations they do offer, but it is what it is, and they've got an impressive line of tools to cover from heavy construction, outdoor power, and regular construction. This tends to be marketed more towards the professionals. In the U.S., Home Depot is the major commercial retailer for Makita. There's other retailers besides them, but Home Depot is the major commercial place that you can find it off the street, if you will. And so just a few of the unique items from the LXT line just to share with you. First, we've got a material transfer cart. This is something I might refer to more as like a firewood carrier. If you need to move logs or you're clearing the woods, or you've got concrete bags that you need to move around for mix, grout bags or something else that you need to move. You've got bags of shingles for a roofing job. All sorts of options for this, powered by that 18-volt battery. Another favorite, a coffee maker, which I'm actually surprised more manufacturers have not tried their own take on this. And then an electric wheelbarrow as well. And they've also had things like a bicycle, and they've never been afraid of trying to innovate and try some clever new products. And so Makita's really done a great job of trying to look at the market and find new ways to grow, adapt, and offer products to bring people into this LXT battery platform, which I think is very commendable. So now if we look at 2007 forward, they launched in 2012 something that I think is very interesting, the 18-volt ×2 platform that had at one point plus or minus about 75 tools. And this has evolved a bit over the years of where you could basically get a 36-volt tool, if you will, using 18-volt tool batteries. And so that came about in about 2012. And then in 2016, the 12-volt, or at least the modern 12-volt line, the CXT line, was launched. I know there was another line that preceded that was 12-volt. That was relatively short-lived. That had the 12-volt battery packs that were very similar to what Milwaukee has maintained. but that lineup was very small. And the current line of CXT tools is about 55, and they cover a wide array. They've even got an automotive ratchet in there now, which I think is interesting, a portable air inflator, multi-tool, and really a nice set of small, compact tools that works relatively well to augment the LXT setup. So now we're talking about the XGT line. This is the new flavor on the street, if you will. And so this XGT line is marketed as 40 volt max, which is really 36 volt, if you will, just to keep apples to apples the same, and was launched in Japan in 2019. Now, I know over the last year or so, there's been clearly some global issues in the supply chain and all the other fallout from 2020. And so this is coming to market now in 2021. And like I said, we're looking at really a 36 volt platform, although 40 volt max, as we've seen the marketing game go with multiple manufacturers at this point. Launching, I believe, later on this year in 2021 based on the latest press releases. And this is separate and unique and meant to complement the LXT and CXT 18 and 12 volt lines respectively. As of now, they're showing 10 tools at launch, but there's clear plans for more than 10 at launch to grow the platform. And interestingly enough, there's a plan for 40 volt times 2, so that's really 80 volt max, if you will, or 72 volt max tools straight up, if you will, for using actual voltage rather than maximum nominal voltage, that are also on the roadmap. And so this is kind of where they're going, and this is intended to sit side by side. Just what CXT does to LXT, they're intending XGT to sit side by side, which I think is a very interesting market position for where they're going with this line of tools. So for this XGT market, I think they're hoping to end up looking at high power tools that would be perfect for, say, the concrete industry, heavy steel constructions like bridge construction, commercial construction, and really, in essence, at least where I really hope to go with this is trying to replace gasoline-powered tools. That there's been a clear trend across the market to eliminate the gasoline engine from job sites and other tools that would call for gasoline power, even all the way down to things like residential string trimmers and lawnmowers. But they've already got some LXT solutions for lawnmowers and string trimmers, but there's a lot of heavy-duty fastening, such as if you're in the steel construction business and you need to put in some big fasteners that have 3/4 inch impact wrenches, 1 inch impact wrenches, concrete demolition, that there's a lot of opportunity for where this particular segment could go towards that upper end of high power demand tools. And so let's take a look at the market and see what's going on in this, we'll call it a higher voltage market. So we've got DeWalt and Milwaukee as obvious competitors in this market space. Starting out, we've got the 20 volt max line from DeWalt and the M18 line from Milwaukee. And then Makita checks in with their competitor in the LXT platform. Again, all 18 or 20 volt max, whatever you want to call it, same thing. And then moving up the spectrum to their next higher tier of voltage, DeWalt brings to market their Flex Volt system. We'll talk about that a bit more in a second. Milwaukee brings their MX Fuel system to the table. And now Makita brings their XGT lineup to the table. And these higher voltage lineups are similar but different in their own unique ways. And I think it'll be interesting as we dissect this market positioning to see what the future may hold, at least in my opinion, for this Makita lineup. So let's first take a look at Milwaukee. So Milwaukee has their M18 platform and a wide assortment of tools. This is just the bare tip of the iceberg here of a handful of tools. They've got the M18 fuel lineup of brushless tools that's been growing a lot over the last few years. And then they launched their MX fuel platform a couple years ago with a unique set of tools with very little overlap between the M18 and the MX fuel platform, with breakers, demolition hammers, concrete saws that are not found in the M18 lineup, And quite frankly, the battery platform itself and the form factor of the battery is not well suited towards hand tools. You're just not going to put an MX Fuel battery on a drill or an impact driver or even a reciprocating saw for that matter. I think the only real overlapping tool here is the light tower that you see on the MX Fuel, because there's a few lighting solutions with the M18 platform that are somewhat similar, but there's a clear market segment differentiation that if you're into the MX Fuel, you're probably also into the M18, but they're not really going to cross paths, and it's a clear move up in the market to a new set of unique tools that's unlocked with that MX Fuel battery. So now if you look at DeWalt, DeWalt has taken a different strategy in this market space, which I think is interesting. So we got their 20 volt max lineup that covers, I believe there's somewhere around 120 tools, give or take at this point. And then their flex volt platform, smaller, but still some unique tools, such as a cordless table saw. I believe they brought this to market even before Milwaukee brought theirs to market. Cordless miter saw, and this is actually a 120 volt max that uses 2 batteries or can be plugged into the wall. Quite fascinating, where you could have corded power or cordless power. And then you've got a variety of these flex volt batteries, and what really makes these interesting is that flex part of that flex volt, where it's both 20 and a 6 volt battery at the same time. So we've got the basic tools on the side of a 20 volt reciprocating saw that's also duplicated over on the flex volt side as well. But the flex volt dedicated tools only work with the flex volt battery, and the 20 volt max tools only work with the 20 volt max battery. Now that miter saw actually uses, on the right, actually uses 2 of those flex volt batteries, which is interesting. And so we got the 20 volt max on the left here, battery that goes with the 20 volt max tool. But where DeWalt, I think, was very clever in their thought was they also made that flex volt battery backwards compatible with their 20 volt tools, so that if you were to move up into their 60 volt lineup, you could still use the battery, which is really at the heart of the investment, in the tools you already have in their 20 volt lineup, making it easy to justify the battery cost. That yes, they're bulky, but on some tools like a reciprocating saw or a circular saw, it might actually be very reasonable to use a flex volt battery on it. Or if push comes to shove, yeah, you could use it on a hammer drill or other tools and still get the mileage and the bang for the buck on that battery. Very clever. And then DeWalt took this one step further with our Power Detect series that was flexible, that would perform with their 20 volt battery and then perform a little bit better with their flex volt battery that kind of provides a unique middle ground in between of where DeWalt has really tried to make this higher voltage platform flexible and provide some level of backwards compatibility, so as someone invests in that 60 volt platform, because really the batteries is part of the big investment in it, that still keeps them grounded and tied into their 20 volt max platform and gets extra mileage even with some tools in that Power Detect series to really play on all the strengths of that battery, which I think is very clever and very smart from DeWalt. So now Makita's play on the system, you've got their LXT system with a variety of tools. Like you saw before, there's a lot more than this, but we'll just simplify it to that and this one battery. The XGT system, here's some of their initial launch tools and the XGT battery. But one of the things that stands out to me is a lot of these tools in the XGT lineup are already found in the LXT lineup, but the batteries are incompatible. And so I find that to be peculiar. That if you're asking someone to move up market to the 40 volt max lineup, but you don't have any clear tools that are going to draw you into that lineup, at least at this point. Hopefully on the roadmap ahead for Makita, there's going to be some new tools, much like the MX Fuel, that might provide that draw. But at the moment, they're not quite there yet. And you've got that new battery platform. So where do we go from here? Some of this makes me think that I've seen this play before. So let's turn back the calendar a little bit and look at some past plays that I think are similar to what Makita is doing. So we'll call this same song second verse. So DeWalt in 2007 launched a 36-volt lithium-ion platform. And mind you, this is before the lithium-ion platform we know in their 20-volt lineup. And so this coexisted with the largely 18-volt NiCad platform for a number of years, but then was abandoned about 7 years later when the 20-volt max platform was launched. And so they were trying to play with the 18 and a 36-volt lineup. That didn't quite go so well for DeWalt. And so I think this is where DeWalt really put some thought into their FlexVolt system for how that could work, so that we don't see something like this 36-volt line kind of coming and going again. But I don't think this is limited exclusively to DeWalt, or think that DeWalt learned all of their lesson. Because let's play this again with DeWalt. In 2015, they launched a 40-volt max platform focused on outdoor power equipment. In my opinion, I think this was trying to target the Ego line that's been growing in dominance in outdoor power. That's a 56-volt platform. But then 4 years later, this 40-volt max platform was abandoned, and they've come out with FlexVolt versions of all these 40-volt max tools. And I think that left a fair bit of professional landscapers a little miffed if they made this investment into 40-volt tools. And so DeWalt's done this now a couple of times. And so again, like, this was phased out when FlexVolt came out, and I think the FlexVolt, or at least the engineers behind FlexVolt, really put some thought in to avoid, I don't know if I can call them failures or not, but these last two lines of tools that I'm sure they would rather you forget ever existed. In fact, I think some of these next lines of tools, the manufacturers would probably rather you forget they existed. So how about Milwaukee? Milwaukee, I mean, fantastic brand. Talked a lot of good things about their MX Fuel, but yeah, they've played with this idea before. In 2010, they launched an M28 platform, which was an upgrade from their V28, largely NiCad platform, going to lithium-ion tools. And their lineup was relatively sparse, focused mainly on construction tools. You got a hammer drill, recip, circular saw, light. None of these were brushless. And by 2016, even Milwaukee abandoned this, and they really focused a lot more on upgrading their lithium-ion battery cells, their brushless motors. And everything that you find in this V28 lineup can be found in their M18 lineup. And I think whenever Milwaukee came up with their MX Fuel, they really tried to avoid this market duplication, because this line also lasted for about 6 years. And so within a few years, everything but their drills had been discontinued, leaving folks in that 36-volt platform largely abandoned again. And Bosch has come back and put a lot of focus on their EC brushless tools in their 18-volt platform, and come up with a lot more interesting tools on that 18-volt platform. But a couple of their drills do still exist and continue to coexist side by side, their 12 and 18-volt platform. I think the most notable one is probably the Bulldog type drill, which might be the single tool that they've got that has the best case scenario for why you'd want to move into a 36-volt tool. But to move into a 36-volt tool for something less than a 7¼ inch circular saw, I'm not sure that really cuts it in 2021. So same song, fifth verse? Wait, are we talking Makita again? Oh yeah, we are talking Makita. Makita's been down this road before. I mentioned that 36-volt battery platform in the past that they launched a few years ago. And so, for example, here's a chainsaw where they actually had a dedicated 36-volt battery that could be used with this chainsaw. But at the time, and there was a handful of other tools, mostly in the outdoor power equipment lineup area, that could take this single 36-volt battery, which, might I remind you, is the same as 40-volt max. But they were rather clever back then and came up with an adapter bracket where you could take that single adapter instead of that 1 8 or 36-volt battery add two 18-volt batteries with the adapter to take that same chainsaw and make it backwards compatible to the 18-volt tools. Very clever. I thought that was a smart play at the time, that you could, people who wanted the simplicity of a single 36-volt battery had it. They also had the ability for you to use your LXT batteries with that same tool, just with the adapter. And then maybe they could sell a few adapters as well, in addition to the batteries, and a few 36-volt batteries. A lot of upside to that, I thought. But then the trend really has went away from that 18-volt battery. But they have continued the 18-volt ×2 lineup, and now a similar chainsaw looks something like this, where there is no adapter required to use it for a ×2 tool, and that 36-volt battery has been, I think, predominantly discontinued. Maybe there's some replacement parts available there for it. But so Makita's been down this route before with 36-volt or 40-volt max, whatever you want to call it, and I thought they had a pretty clever move the first time. So I'm a little confused at where they're trying to go with this now and how successful I think this is going to be. So let's talk a little bit about what I think are the rights and wrongs of this XGT system. Let's start with the positives here for what I think Makita is getting right here. That they're starting with, at least with a decent range of tools at launch that's larger than what some of the other abandoned platforms I talked about ever got to. They also have a charging adapter, so you could charge your LXT batteries on an XGT charger, which I think is nice, that you can have that bit of backwards compatibility, but that's also kind of its weakness, that that's its only backwards compatibility. There's a look at the adapter there. Where I also think it's interesting is that 80-volt max tool, or 40-volt ×2, which is really a 72-volt tool. Like, that's the same voltage that MX Fuel competes at. And if Makita can release tools that are on par with those MX Fuel tools, where you can use simply two of those batteries together to get to an MX Fuel type tool, you know, ones that really are a gasoline engine type tool, that's probably where the sweet spot is for this, because then you could use that 40-volt max battery into a drill or an impact driver or a recip or a circular saw, but then pair it with another one and basically get MX Fuel type output. Like, that would be amazing if they can, if the roadmap leads there. And that's hopefully where they go with this. But in my opinion, let's talk about a few things that I think they get wrong. The first one, I think, is because it's a brand new battery platform. So if you're going to upgrade to this XGT line and you've got to have new batteries, new tools with no backwards compatibility, what's to stop you from going with an MX Fuel tool? That's just as incompatible with the M18 line of tools. I don't see anything other than someone just being a loyal Makita fan for sticking with that Makita name, that there's no reason you couldn't consider yourself a free agent at that point and look around for some other options. Especially if they don't bring these 80-volt tools to market soon enough. I think there's going to be a few wandering eyes that go with that MX Fuel line out there, or maybe even the DeWalt FlexVolt that, you know, could steal some market share away from Makita. And so far, for another thing I think they get wrong, is right off the bat at launch in the US, there's not any unique XGT-only tools. There's not something like a concrete breaker or something that you can only get in XGT that makes you go, if I want that tool, I need that battery. But it happens to work with this other drill over here that I could buy. But that's not what they're flying with out the door, which leaves me kind of confused. I think Makita could have made a much stronger play out the gate for having a couple of unique tools as really eye candy to draw you into the platform. And the other bit is, I'm not sure there's a lot of clear retail channels at this point. I would suspect Grainger would likely be one of the retail channels. There's some online channels where this is going to be available, I believe with Acme Tools and a couple others. But what about other retail channels that if a contractor needs to go get something and get something now, where do they do that at? Only time will answer that one. It'd be nice to know that off the right off the bat and out of the gate, but we don't know that yet. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but again, the more that you cause a contractor to hesitate on making a purchase, the more room there is for them to wander to another platform. And I think that MX Fuel platform is pretty attractive at the moment. And Makita's big opportunity, in my opinion, is going to be that 40 volt times 2 lineup. The quicker they can roll that out to compete with MX Fuel, that's going to likely dictate the survival of this platform. So as it stands right now, the higher voltage platform graveyard, if you will, is getting kind of full. We've got the DeWalt 36, 40 volt, the M28, the Bosch 36 volt, and even the Makita 36 volt platforms just lying in rest, waiting for someone else to get buried alongside these tools. So what are my predictions for this XGT lineup? I think it's pretty clear there's going to be more XGT tools that are going to come out. The question is when and what. And then, well, what's the performance of these tools and how do they compare to others? Because like I said with that XGT, that if it doesn't compete with others, that leaves you kind of open to jump to another platform. Do you go to DeWalt and you get some of that backwards compatibility with FlexVolt and their 20 volt max system? Do you like the play that Milwaukee has, that they already have a bunch of unique tools in their MX Fuel lineup? And the faster that Makita can roll out unique tools that compete head-to-head with the MX Fuel, that's what's going to dictate the success. And then long-term, I think there's a couple of options. If this platform is successful and they are able to compete head-to-head with MX Fuel and kind of have that compatibility to make it half the weight and half the size of an MX Fuel battery, that maybe that LXT system gets phased out slowly over time. When DeWalt launched their 20 volt max system, there was a lot of people upset who were heavily invested in the 18 volt max system. And DeWalt generally did a decent job of trying to say that we're going to support the 18 volt system. And they eventually came around to an adapter to adapt 20 volt batteries to the 18 volt system, which is something I think they should have done from day one. It would have made a lot of contractors happier, but they eventually got to it, which is great. And so I think that if the XGT uptake goes really well, we're going to probably see that LXT system phased out in favor of it, maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, give or take. But on the other hand, if this uptake doesn't go well because it's such a separate line from the LXT, it's maybe just as likely as that XGT system gets retired. Because if you retire the XGT system, it doesn't really affect the LXT system. Makita's retired other systems in the past as well, and most of the other brands have flirted with an idea similar to this XGT system, and it's failed. So I can see this really diverting either way, and like I said, the more they can that Makita can compete with MX Fuel, the better off they're going to be. But I think there's one more wild card out there, is what will the brand new Flex 24 volt line do in the future? That are they going to make a play on, say, a 48 volt tool if you put two of their batteries together? You know, if you call it 48 volt max or 43.2 volts to be exact. Is there some other play waiting in the wings coming from Shervon? I've got some suspicion that Shervon's been flirting with some technology that might be similar to the FlexVolt technology, or maybe they make a play with a ×2 and a 48 volt with some of their unique battery and motor technology. What are they doing in the wings? And if there's some pressure in the future from them, that could kind of dictate this outcome. If that slightly higher voltage 24 volt max or 21.6, does outperform the LXT line, or outperforms the M18 line, outperforms the 20 volt max line, maybe there'll be some upward pressure from by Flex on Makita, Milwaukee, and DeWalt, and maybe that would be to the benefit of the XGT system. But I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a wild card since, at least as of early April 2021, the Flex line is not out yet. And that'll take a while for the market to kind of settle and figure out where does everything shake out at the end of the day. So here's the graveyard as it stands, like I showed you earlier. And based on what I'm seeing so far, it's hard for me not to be thinking that there might need to be room in this graveyard for a new occupant. You know, it pains me to say this, that I'm not the most optimistic person about this XGT lineup. I would love to be proved wrong. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but I think Makita has to play their cards right, get out the door with a strong play against MX Fuel with backwards compatibility into smaller form factor tools like a drill, because that's the big segment that MX Fuel doesn't have. But just having a separate but equal standalone tool platform that mirrors quite a few of their 18-volt tools, history tells us that's not going to succeed. And people aren't going to take well to that, or for it to create the market dominance that it needs to be a successful parallel platform. I mean, Makita's even already dabbled with this in the past with their their 36-volt line. And that's kind of went by the wayside in favor of 18-volt times 2. Now, maybe Makita could come out with a XGT to LXT dual battery adapter. I think that might help save this line. But I'm sorry, Makita. I really wish I could be more optimistic about this. You know, I really love some of your tools. You've got some great, great tools, but I'm just not convinced this is the right play in the market with this XGT lineup. I don't know. I wish I could feel better about this, but history, just taking a page out of history, just gives me some doubts. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and hearing my opinion on this. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think XGT is going to the moon and back and is going to be the bee's knees and is going to be the best thing. Put it in the comments below. If you agree with me and you remember some of these other tool platforms from the past, let me know as well. I think everyone, it's easy to forget some of these older tool platforms that have went by the wayside. But if we don't learn from our history, history's bound to repeat itself. And that's what I'm fearful happening here with this XGT lineup. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.